Tyler continued checking the system, trying to focus on his work. But the screen flickered again. His heart pounded in his chest. This time, on the black background of the monitor, a crimson line of text slowly appeared, like blood seeping through. "Why did you abandon me?" His throat tightened, and each breath grew heavier. Cold sweat started to bead on his forehead, trailing down his face. This wasn't a regular system glitch, nor was it someone's prank. A sense of unease surged through him, like an invisible specter tightening its grip around him. Then, amidst the flickering screen, the image of a woman appeared, blurred yet more vivid than before. Her face glided across the screen, her jet black hair disheveled and obscuring half of her features. But her eyes, deep, endless voids, pitch black and staring directly at him. It was no longer a faint image. She was glaring at him as if trying to pierce us into his soul, leaving him nowhere to hide. "No, it can't be," Tyler whispered, his body stiffening as if frozen in fear. He recognized that face, etched deeply in his memories. It was Hailey, a colleague who had vanished without a trace several months ago. The rumors, the murky stories he'd overheard, suddenly felt terrifyingly real. The lights in the room flickered, then went out completely. The office plunged into darkness, leaving only the faint crimson glow of the computer screen. It reflected the horrifying image of the woman. A soft, chilling laugh echoed, seeming to come from right behind Tyler, freezing him to the core. He spun around abruptly, his wide, panic-stricken eyes darting across the room. But there was nothing. The oppressive silence swallowed everything, weighing down the atmosphere. All he could hear was the frantic pounding of his own heart, echoing through the eerie stillness. Suddenly, from the depths of the darkness, a sound emerged, a raspy, labored breathing, fast and uneven, as if it was right next to him. The breaths felt unnervingly close, cold and suffocating. Tyler felt each gust on the nape of his neck, making his spine tingle with icy dread. The sound of click, clack came from the keyboard, snapping Tyler back to reality. He looked down. The keys were typing on their own, even though his hands hadn't touched them. On the screen, crimson letters emerged, forming a haunting message. "They abandoned me, and so did you." Tyler's heart constricted, fear surging to its peak. The room seemed to transform into an invisible trap, imprisoning him with Hailey's ghostly presence. His hands were icy cold. Panic began to overwhelm him. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the screen, where Hailey's image was now shifting. Her face distorted grotesquely, her eyes no longer human. They were dark, empty voids, staring straight into his soul. Desperate, Tyler tried to turn off the computer, but the power button wouldn't respond. The screen flickered again, displaying a scene of a dark room with a familiar desk. It was his office. At the desk, a chair slowly swiveled, revealing Hailey sitting there. Blood oozed from the wounds across her body, and her pale, lifeless eyes stared directly at him through the monitor. Another line of text appeared. "You will pay, every one of you." Tyler could feel something behind him, a cold presence creeping closer. An icy chill spread down his spine, paralyzing him. A faint, deliberate breathing broke the oppressive silence, slow, heavy, as if someone was lurking right behind him. Cold sweat dripped down his temples. He didn't dare turn around, but every fiber of his being screamed that he was no longer alone. In the crushing weight of his fear, Tyler's gaze remained locked on the computer screen. The image of Hailey abruptly vanished, replaced by something even more terrifying, himself. He saw his own reflection, sitting at his desk, but his eyes were blank, drained of all life. His face was pale, as if all the blood had been sucked from his body. Tyler looked like a corpse, cold and soulless. The horrifying sight made him gasp for air, his hands frozen in place. His heart raced, and terror surged through his veins. Worse still, in the reflection, something was standing behind him. Though blurry and indistinct, he could feel its menacing presence. A shadowy figure loomed in the background, dark and vague, poised to strike at any moment. "No way!" Tyler shouted, desperately trying to wake himself from what he thought was a nightmare haunting his mind. He shot up from his chair, his frantic gaze sweeping across the room, but there was no one, nothing unusual in sight. Yet the sensation that someone was watching him from behind refused to dissipate. In sheer panic, Tyler acted on impulse, rushing to his computer and smashing the screen. His breathing was ragged, his heart pounding erratically, and sweat drenched his forehead. He thought breaking the screen would bring everything back to normal, but it didn't. The monitor remained eerily bright, its cold light casting a ghostly glow, unaffected by the cracks. The horrifying image was still there, his own pale face in the photo, accompanied by the dark, shadowy figure behind him, now clearer than ever. Tyler stumbled back, his horror mounting. "How is this possible?" he muttered, his voice trembling. The entire room seemed suffused with an unexplainable chill, as if the life force itself was slowly draining away. The overwhelming fear froze every nerve in his body. On the screen, the shadowy figure behind him began to move, inching closer to his image. He collapsed into his chair, shaking violently, his eyes glued to the screen. The reflection of himself suddenly came to life. No longer a static image, it began to move, slowly turning its head, its soulless white eyes boring into him in the present. "This can't be real. This can't be happening," Tyler shouted, his voice cracking with fear. But the terrifying silence of the room swallowed his cries, leaving only the faint whistling of the wind outside the window and the ticking of the clock, each sound amplifying the oppressive atmosphere. Suddenly, Tyler's gaze was drawn to the edge of the shattered monitor, where his own reflection glimmered faintly. What made his blood run cold was the sight of something standing behind him in the reflection. Not just his silhouette in the dim light, but Hailey. She stood there, vivid and unmistakable, no longer distant or blurry as before. Her face now brimmed with rage and hatred, her opaque white eyes blazing with fury as she glared at Tyler through the fractured screen. Tyler's terror peaked. Hailey, the kind, gentle colleague he once knew, was no longer herself. She had become something else, something vengeful, something malevolent, and her target was unmistakably him. What is this?" Tyler stammered, his voice barely audible. He spun around, but the space behind him was empty. The room was filled with nothing but darkness and an unearthly chill. Then, without warning, the computer screen went black, plunging the room into pitch darkness. The wind outside howled louder, its icy fingers reaching into Tyler's very core. The suffocating silence was broken only by his own rapid, uneven breathing. That was when he realized he wasn't alone. A second breath, faint and deliberate, blew softly against the back of his neck. It was cold, damp, and smelled of decay, seeping into his very skin. Tyler froze, every muscle locked in place. He could feel it. Something, someone, was standing directly behind him. Unable to endure the oppressive fear any longer, he whipped around, eyes wide, and scanning the impenetrable darkness of the room. Nothing. No figure, no movement, only the pounding of his heart echoing in his ears. The absolute stillness weighed heavily, as though the very air conspired to suffocate him. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought relief, but a menacing void that amplified his unease. The room itself seemed alive, a predator hiding within the shadows, biding its time. Every nerve in Tyler's body screamed to flee, but his legs felt like lead. The darkness seemed to coil around him, alive and pulsing, waiting for the moment to pounce. And deep within that suffocating blackness, Tyler knew something was watching, waiting.